The month of October we know is Respect Life Month, also the month of the Rosary. I wish to talk about the sacrament of marriage, one of our great themes for Respect Life. I'm going to begin with the story of a family. In the spring of 1858, there was a man walking across a bridge in North France. And there's a woman coming on the other way. And as they crossed, the woman heard a voice inside, an interior voice say, "This is the man I have prepared for you." How many of you had that experience when you were about to start dating somebody or get married? I don't know. But this woman had that experience, and 3 months later, they were married. This is Louis Martin, and Zélie Guérin, who were to become the parents of Saint Therese of Lisieux. The parents were canonized in 2015. Their daughter, Therese, had been canonized already in 1923. Louis, at age 19, had moved out from his home to another city in France to learn how to make clocks and watches. He then had this desire to go to a monastery, so he tried to enter an Augustinian monastery in Switzerland, but he was refused because he did not know Latin. He began to study Latin, but then continued his studies to become a watchmaker. And at age 27, he completed this apprenticeship and began his own shop. It is said of him that he was a lover of silence and solitude. He diligently filled his religious duties and cultivated union with God. Prayer and meditation, for which he showed a special propensity. He also made pilgrimages to Chartres and Lourdes, and he loved nature. Zélie, as a young woman, sought to enter the Daughter of Charity convent, but she also was refused admission. The following year, while in prayer about her future to the Blessed Virgin Mary, she heard an interior voice tell her to begin making lace, which she did, and she set up a successful business for herself. As they were married, Louis and Zélie abstained from outer relations for almost a year. They wanted to model their life after the Holy Family, after Saint Mary and Saint Joseph. A priest finally persuaded them to do otherwise, and they had 9 children over 13 years. This is a family that attended daily Mass at 6:30 a.m. They maintained an atmosphere of prayer, devotion. They practiced forgiveness in the home. They learned generosity to the poor together. They shared affection. This was a joy-filled Catholic family. Business was prosperous. But this was also a family that would experience the difficult things in life. Zélie could not nurse, so she would often spend the night with a wet nurse 20 miles away. 3 of the 9 children died before the age of 1, and another child died at the age of 5. Zélie developed breast cancer. She bore her cross with remarkable strength of spirit and with interior and exterior tranquility. She tried to console her family members, and especially her young daughters, and she died at the age of 45. Therese, Saint Therese, was only 4.5 years old. Louis then sold his business and moved to Lisieux, about 60 miles away, to be near family. 4 of his 5 daughters entered religious life. Louis suffered strokes and developed dementia in later life. He was placed in a home for the mentally ill. Then some of his daughters came out of the convent to help care for him. After another stroke and 2 heart attacks, he died in 1894. St. John Paul II declared that the Martins lived their virtues heroically. And following the miraculous healing of an Italian infant, they were beatified in 2008. And after another miracle, the healing of a Spanish infant, they were able to be canonized in 2015. They were ordinary people. They loved God in their Catholic faith. They always put God in their faith first, then family. Faith in God does not mean an absence of hardship in life, nor shelter from tragedy and deep loss. No matter what, God and faith came first for this family. This is how their children were able to develop what I call a Catholic world view. This family has produced 3 canonized saints. Jesus talks today in the gospel about God's plan for marriage. He goes back to that chapter in Genesis that we have in the first reading. God's intention was always for marriage to be between a man and a woman, that it would be a union of a man and a woman. We can see this coming together of bone from my bone, flesh from my flesh, to come back to one in unity and not in division. A couple of statements from the Catechism. Marriage and family life are ordered to the good of the spouses and to the procreation and education of children. The Martins exhibited this in a wonderful way. Another saying from the Catechism, the supreme gift of marriage is a human person. The supreme gift of marriage. We think about our world today, our culture. What is the message? Well, get married or not, or have some configuration of being together, and then maybe we won't have kids or not. This idea that we're going to choose a sterile way of life reflects downstream what St. John Paul II has called the culture of death. As we began to realize we could contracept, we think we can control the fruits of the marital act, we began to instrumentalize that act. We began to take it out of its context. And so consequently, we have many, many couples who are choosing sterility, lacking the fruitfulness of marriage in our world today. In fact, this is not a good. For many, it's a deprivation or a privation. It's a difficult thing. But a world that says it is good to be married and not have children has something wrong with it. In fact, think about this. Biologically, how many species decide not to procreate? Biologically, scientifically, it makes 0 sense. We're designed to continue the pattern of life. Contracepting apart from natural family planning allows us to think that we are masters of our destiny, all the while increasing the possibility that we may have difficulty conceiving later on. Life is always a gift from God. Another saying from the Catechism, physical sterility is not an absolute evil. Spouses who still suffer from this should unite themselves to the Lord's cross, their source of spiritual fecundity. They can give expression to their generosity by adopting abandoned children or performing demanding services for others. Another saying, through the grace of the sacrament of marriage, parents receive the responsibility and privilege of evangelizing their children. I remember having a conversation many years ago in another parish with a parent that said, well, Father, I think we want our kids to be baptized. They're 8, 9 years old. I said, what happened? They said, well, we just decided we'd let them choose their own way. And I said, that was a very bad decision. We live in the dominion of God, or we live in the dominion of Satan. We live in the dominion of light or the dominion of darkness. There is no such thing as a value-free world out there where we will just let people choose. If we do not provide values for our family, who will provide values for our loved ones? The world will, and they will not be our values. I guarantee you, there is no such thing as a spiritual vacuum that is neutral and value-free. Do not be deceived into thinking that. It is our responsibility through baptism to raise our children in the faith with a Catholic world view. The Martins did this in spades, and they produced saints. In marriage, the physical intimacy of the spouses becomes a sign and pledge of spiritual communion. True intimacy requires care. It is always chaste and fosters a deep love of God and others. The sacrament of marriage is a gift, but it's a gift that requires some effort and care on our part. How many of you have decided that marriage is really super easy? Okay, I have a vocation. You who are married have a vocation. I've decided that I love my vocation, but it's not easy, is it? Those callings, those things that Christ calls us to are worth every effort, every ounce of our being, but they are not easy. But they are a beautiful, wonderful thing. Marriage is the closest glimpse, when well done, of Trinitarian love, of heaven itself. The goal here is to give, like the Blessed Trinity, the persons of the Blessed Trinity, to give oneself without reserve, meaning without expectation, without psychological baggage and strings attached, one to the other in mutual reciprocity, never a taking or grabbing of the goods of marriage for oneself. In this way, the union becomes holy, and thus the spiritual good is satisfying and edifying. We gain little, like I mentioned earlier, by looking at our world for cues on how to live a good married life. Instead, we must look to God, to the Blessed Trinity, and to the teachings of the Church, and to good examples in the Church, just like the Holy Family and the Martins. Divorce is not a good, but oftentimes it's necessary. We walk with those who experience divorce. We walk together as church. Louise and Zelie put God first in their marriage. They lived a chaste life, at first living like St. Mary and St. Joseph, and then living the union of matrimony as a chaste couple that conceived 9 children. Can their example and intercession be helpful to us? For example, are you cohabiting? Their example can lead you back to chaste living. It is possible to gain self-mastery in the name of love because of divine charity. Chastity during courtship. We ask couples preparing for marriage to remain chaste until they marry. Chastity means we abstain from sexual relations unless we're married and can have the marital act together. It is possible, even in the marital act, we're called to be chaste. Not about what I want. It's about the mutual gift of self, as John Paul II taught us in Theology of the Body. Chastity in courtship is so helpful, not only to avoid grave sin, but to help us develop intimacy. Think about this. Physical union alone is not a sign of intimacy. In fact, in our pornographic world, we can say that porn, the problem is not that it reveals too much, but in fact, it reveals too little of the person. If your relationship is primarily physical, you will not have the tools to sustain a lifelong commitment in that relationship. In this case, the physical union is a crutch, a mirage of deeper intimacy, communion, and commitment. Begin abstaining, develop self-mastery, and begin to develop deeper communication skills and intimacy as a couple. Are you divorced or remarried? And if you are and you've not yet had a chance to work on annulments for your prior bonds, how can we help you? We'd like to help you. We'd like to walk with you through that. We have people to help you, and again, the Martins can help us, even in your current state in life, return to chaste living. Are you a same-sex couple? Perhaps you're married civilly. What would the church ask of you in holiness? Chaste living. I, in fact, know gay couples who are Catholic who live chastely. Wrap your mind around that. It's possible. Are you experiencing difficulty conceiving? This is a sorrow for many, a challenge for many. We ask the Martins for their intercession and grace and guidance. Have you lost young ones, either in utero or as infants and young children? The Martins are often great intercessors for our consolation. I present them as saints for today, for all of us. Married and family life are key to our identity as human beings. This is why there's such a gift from God to help us understand the union of the Blessed Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The Martins are saints for a broken world. Think about it. Has our culture enriched marriage with all of its permutations and permissions, or has our world devalued marriage? Is what the church asks of Christian marriage simply an ideal, or is it real faith and real time for real people with real issues? One of the joys of pondering that word, chaste living, is the idea that we can mediate love appropriate to our state in life. This means that even though I'm a celibate priest, which means I abstain from sexual relations, I'm able to give myself fully. Sexuality has much more with being an enfleshed soul than it does with genital sex. Sexuality is living and loving with the whole person. So my life is not sexless. My life is very fulfilling because I give myself to you. When I preach, I give pretty much everything I have to you. I'm usually somewhat vulnerable when I preach because I'm giving myself to you. I receive from you. That's what priests do. In married and family life, we give our whole selves to the sacrament. Whatever our vocation is, we're called to live this fully and freely, but chastely. That's how we continue to have a very rewarding experience in the faith. We Catholics cannot boast, but in the cross of Christ, when we find our crosses and unite them to His in holiness, to our Lord's, He makes all things new. He renews and restores our faith after bad relationships. He helps us rethink present situations so that we can return to the sacraments. And best of all, he reminds everyone here, every single person in this room, we are all called to be a saint, even me and even you.